he's just way too far outside of the mainstream. And frankly, he's just way too weird for the Texas electorate. So doesn't mean it's not going to be an expensive, hard-fought race. It could be close, but I have to believe Republicans in Texas are not going to want to be represented by somebody who thinks there's 6 genders and we should have no meat. I just don't see how that's going to fly in Texas.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So this panel on CNN gets into where the midterms actually stand, and the two strategists could not see it more differently. One side is looking at fresh polling and feeling good about where things are headed. The other side is waving it off, insisting the numbers don't mean what they look like, and that a mountain of outside money is about to change everything. It turns into a real back and forth over whether cash can buy an election that the mood of the country seems to be moving against. Comment yes if you think a flood of billionaire money can flip a race on its own. Comment no if you think voters have already made up their minds and no check changes that. Let's get into it.
Right now, 47% of Americans say they prefer a Democratic candidate representing them in Congress over 39% of voters who say they'd pick a Republican. And by a 10-point margin, Americans now see Democrats as what they describe as the party of change, which is a pretty big shift from last spring when it was actually Republicans who held a 7-point advantage in that space. My political sources are here tonight, including Karen Finney, who is the former senior advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, and Scott Jennings, who is the former senior advisor to Senator Mitch McConnell. And Scott, when you look at these numbers, Democrats winning on a generic ballot by 8 points this close to the midterms, does that worry you?
Well, sure. I'm a political operative. Everything in every election worries me. There are other generic ballot polls out there that have it a little bit closer than that. And I actually think a generic ballot lead for the Democrats needs to be fairly substantial for them to have any comfort whatsoever. I've seen polls out there, 3, 4, 5 points. I'm not sure that would be enough for Democrats because the redistricting wars have netted out seats for the Republicans, 10 to 12. Republicans have more money. And I think in even some of the battleground districts around the country, the Democrats have probably nominated lunatics who are way outside of sort of the moderate purplish tint of these districts. And so it's not a national election. It'll be fought district to district and state to state. And so even though the generic environment here, would it worry me a little bit? But I do see some signs in individual districts where the Republicans have reason for optimism.
I mean, Karen, as our Democrat here, how do you see it? Do you have enough cushion to make you feel comfortable? Do you want to see different numbers here? What are you looking at?
Well, similar to Scott, as somebody who has been doing this a long time, I'm never comfortable until all the votes are counted. So, look, I think Democrats have to continue to press our case. And, really this election is going to come down to who do voters trust to deliver, whether it's change or to deliver on the promises they're making. We are hearing from voters pretty consistently now in focus groups. They feel betrayed by President Trump. They thought he was going to address the economy. They have not seen him do that. We had, new economic numbers out today. Again, like between that and the war in Iran, with costs staying high and the uncertainty in the electorate, I think that Democrats are pressing the case, but we can't let our feet off the gas at this point.
Scott, the president keeps saying, maybe I'll nominate Todd Blanche in January when the environment's more favorable and John Cornyn and Tom Tillis are gone. If you look at Texas, which the president won by nearly 14 percentage points in 2024, a Fox News poll of Texas voters shows James Talarico, the Democrat in that race, leading Ken Paxton. It's within the margin of error, but if you're looking at that as a Republican, how do you see it?
This is the number that should be keeping one whole party up at night, 47 to 39 on the generic ballot, and suddenly the label Party of Change has flipped sides. You have to understand how big that shift really is. Just months ago, the other side owned that identity, and now it has slipped right through their fingers. That does not happen by accident. That happens when people look at what was promised and compare it to what actually showed up in their lives. And watch what happens when Kaitlan Collins puts the pressure directly on the Republican strategist. She asks him point blank, Democrats winning on a generic ballot by 8 points this close to the midterms, does that worry you? And Scott Jennings does something operatives almost never do on live television. He admits it. Scott said this, well, sure, everything in every election worries. That tiny word, sure, tells you more than an hour of spin ever could. Now here is what people do not realize. When a strategist immediately starts explaining why a lead might not be big enough, when he starts reaching for redistricting math and district by district excuses, that is not confidence. That is a man quietly building building a safety net in advance. You do not reach for a safety net when you actually believe you are winning. And let me break down why the redistricting point cuts the other way. Sure, maps can be drawn to protect seats, but maps do not change how people feel when they open their bills. Maps do not fix a broken promise about the economy. You can redraw a district line. You cannot redraw disappointment. That feeling follows voters straight into the booth no matter how the lines are shaped. And this is the part that gets me. The strongest card the other side is holding is basically, our maps might save us. Think about that. When your closing pitch is not our results, but our lines are drawn well, you have already surrendered the argument that actually matters.
It's going to be a close race and it's going to cost a lot of money. I do think that it's going to be a race of contrasts. It's going to be a very negative campaign. I do think at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of Republicans out there who maybe they didn't vote for Ken Paxton in the primary. Maybe he's not exactly what they wanted, but when presented with the facts on Talarico, he's just way too far outside of the mainstream. And frankly, he's just way too weird for the Texas electorate. So doesn't mean it's not going to be an expensive, hard-fought race. It could be close, but I have to believe Republicans in Texas are not going to want to be represented by somebody who thinks there's 6 genders and we should have no meat. I just don't see how that's going to fly in Texas.
You know, here's what I would say in response to that. Talarico, I think, has done a very good job of talking about his values and his faith. And when those attacks came, he went out there early. He continues to talk about them. I think people are getting a feel for who he is, what his values are. And that just does not stack up to Ken Paxton, who quite literally has more scandals on his rap sheet than we've seen in quite some time in Texas. And we also saw that in that same poll, voters are concerned about whether or not he has the character to be in the Senate. That is not going to change. I agree with Scott that I think that race is going to get very ugly because Paxton's only path is to continue to attack Talarico. We'll see if that works, but I suspect in a mood and a change electorate, you're going to see people say, we're tired of that. We want to give this young guy with great ideas, who we believe can deliver on that change. Let's give him a chance.
Well, and Paxton is struggling to raise money, according to the New York Times. We haven't seen Republican donors really stepping in. You know, one person who is planning to spend a lot this November, Scott, is apparently Elon Musk. The New York Times reports today that he has authorized his super PAC to spend at least $100 million to help Republicans in the midterms. But before I get your thoughts on that, I thought about something that he said not that long ago. That was this.
In terms of political spending, I'm going to do a lot less in the future.
And why is that?
I think I've done enough.
Is it because of blowback?
Well, if I see a reason to do political spending in the future, I will do it. I do not currently see a reason.
Oh, here we go. The moment the plan became attack the person instead of defending the record, the whole game gave itself away. Scott Jennings looked at a competitive Texas race and reached straight for the label bin. Scott said this: he's just way too weird for the Texas electorate. And here is what I want you to notice. That is not an argument. That is a bumper sticker. When you cannot run on what your own candidate has done, you slap a word on the other guy and pray it stick. And this is the part that really gets me. The Republican in that race is carrying a mountain of baggage, a long trail of controversy that has trailed him for years, and the best available counter move is to call the young challenger strange. That is the political version of pointing across the room and shouting, "Look over there." You have to understand what that reveals. When your own candidate cannot survive a character conversation, you desperately need the spotlight anywhere but on him. And Karen Finney handled it exactly right. Instead of swallowing the bait, she turned the conversation back toward values, faith, and character, and let the contrast do the work. Because when one side is talking about who they actually are, and the other side is only talking about how weird you are, regular voters can feel that difference instantly. Then the conversation swings to money, and then is where it gets almost comical. $100 million promised to prop up one side. But roll the tape back just a little. The same billionaire, not long ago, sat there and said this: "I don't currently see a reason." He told the world he was done, that he had done enough. And now, suddenly, $100 million materializes out of nowhere. Let me tell you what that whiplash actually means. When a man swears he sees no reason to spend, then floods the zone with cash months later, the reason was never principle. The reason was leverage. And everyone cheering that check should ask one uncomfortable question: what exactly does $100 million expect to buy?
What do you make of that, Scott, with today's news?
Well, number one, think about where we were this time last summer. Elon Musk was mad at the president, mad at the party, and was threatening to start another political party. Now he's going to spend $100 million for the Republicans. Thank God, because he was an integral part of the Republicans winning in 2024, and the party needs him. And he's going to be better off, I think, with Republicans than Democrats for the rest of his life. But, it's interesting. When I interviewed Elon for the book that I wrote about President Trump's first 100 days in office, I could tell then, and this was last year, that he was kind of bent out of shape with both parties in Washington. He didn't think there were enough people in Washington who shared his concerns about the national debt, the immigration crisis, the looming, what he thinks is maybe a bankruptcy crisis for the United States of America when you consider $40 trillion in debt. So I can understand why, if you're disappointed with everybody, you wouldn't want to spend much money on politics. But for right now, given the stakes of this election and given the fact that Western civilization is on the ballot, and I know how much he cares about that, I'm glad to see him come to the Republican Party.
Okay. So, look, yes, should Democrats be concerned with Musk? Yes. It's a lot of money, and we know money matters. At the same time, given that in this electorate, people are one of the things they're most angry about is big money in politics. They believe that corruption, which they see Donald Trump as being corrupt. This is a party that is protecting pedophiles with the Todd Blanche nomination. Having a guy spend big dollars on candidates, I think, strengthens the Democrats' argument that this is a party that is bought and sold by trillionaires, not even millionaires or billionaires, a trillionaire. And that's not somebody you can trust to go to Washington and pay attention to your concerns, which haven't really been getting through.
And this right here is the moment the mask slips completely. Because when a strategist needs to justify a $100 million check, he does not say it will help working families. He does not say it will lower your costs. Instead, Scott Jennings reaches for the most dramatic phrase in the entire conversation. Scott said this: Western civilization is on the ballot. Sit with that for a second. Western civilization. Not roads, not wages, not the price of groceries. The entire fate of civilization, apparently, now rides on a super PAC. Here is what people do not realize about language like that. When you turn an ordinary midterm into the survival of civilization itself, you are not informing voters, you are frightening them. Fear is the oldest tool in the political toolbox, and history keeps proving it worked, which is exactly why it should make you suspicious. Look back at almost any moment when a movement insisted the sky was falling and only their money could hold it up. The goal was never to lift people, the goal was to keep them scared enough to stop asking hard questions. And then Karen Finney lands the point that actually matters. She said this: bought and sold by trillionaires. And whether that phrasing is your style or not, she put her finger right on the raw nerve. Because the one thing voters from every background keep saying they are sick of is the feeling that their voice gets buried under enormous check. When a single man can promise more money than entire towns will earn in a lifetime, the average person is completely right to wonder if their vote still counts for anything. Let me break down why this is the real story of the whole segment. One side spent the entire conversation talking about maps, money, and civilization. Not once did the pitch become, here is what we actually did for you, and that silence is louder than anything they said out loud. When your whole case rests on outside cash and end-of-the-world language, you are quietly admitting your record cannot carry the weight on its own. And here is the part I need you to hold on to. Money can buy ads. Money can buy airtime. Money can buy 1,000 attack mailers crammed into your mailbox. But money has never once bought the way a person feels when they are struggling and nobody in power seems to notice. That feeling is exactly what this whole election is circling, and no billionaire, no matter how many zeros sit on that check, can write that feeling away. So the choice gets simple. You can be talked at by people insisting civilization depends on their donors, or you can back the side actually willing to talk about your life. I know which one earns my trust. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.